He followed a thin red seam across the snow and found her roped to a fence, 3 newborn girls crying at her knees. Cole Sawyer came out of the timber at a steady lope, breath white, coat rimed, horse shouldering the wind. He had been checking drifted fence lines after the storm, counting posts the cold would take before spring could pay it back. Then the tracks began, boot heels that hunted, a drag pattern where someone had fallen, a scatter of hands and powder. And that thin seam. He rode slower. He listened to the land the way men listen when they owe it. The fence bent there, a corner where barbed wire met rough cedar. She was tied at the waist with rope bitten hard into a plain dress, knees sunk in snow, hair wet with sweat that had turned to frost. Her hands were raw from labor and wire. Around her, 3 small bundles kicked weakly in the white, mouths open to a sky that had no milk to give. One had a scrap of burlap. One lay on her own skirt. One moved only when the wind lost interest. Cole swung down. The horse stood with steam lifting off its flank, ears pinned at the smell of blood and fear. He knelt and put his coat between the babies and the snow, one by one, not wasting emotion. He slid his canteen into the woman's palm and guided it up. She drank like a person coming back from a far bank. Her gaze climbed his face slow, learning it, ready to flinch. It didn't. She was past flinching. He took his knife and cut the rope. The blade bit through clean. She sagged and caught herself on the post. He set a hand to her shoulder, not to press, only to steady. The fence hummed in the wind. The world went very quiet around the sound of 3 small lives insisting on their right to keep breathing. He didn't ask her name yet. He found a strip of linen in his saddlebag and wrapped each girl in turn, tight, the way Plains women taught, arms tucked, shoulders snug, heat trapped where heat meant tomorrow. He worked careful, jaw set, eyes soft. The woman watched his hands, as if the way a man held a newborn told true things about him no words could. Snow lifted in sheets and tried to erase what had happened. It would not succeed today. Cole shrugged out of his coat and made a nest of it in the lee of the post. He slid the smallest girl there and placed the other 2 beside her, close enough that their crying tangled into one sound. He took his scarf and tied it around the woman's middle where the rope had left an angry welt. Cloth over wound, respect over harm. Only then did he let himself look at her face straight on. Too young for the hurt in it. Cheek split where a ring had struck. One eye swollen, mouth chapped to blood. Still, the line of her jaw held, the stubborn thread in people who refuse to vanish. "Can you stand?" he said, voice even, a question shaped like a plank laid across water. She tried. Pain folded her. He caught her without making her feel weak, the way a man holds a skittish colt, firm, quiet, no surprise. She leaned against the post and found a breath that didn't break her. Hoofbeats far off, men returning to admire their work. Cole's head turned a fraction. He counted the beats. 2 horses. 3. Voices thin in the cold, laughing at nothing. He looked back at the woman. She understood before he spoke. Fear moved behind her eyes and then went still. He moved fast in small ways. He lifted each wrapped girl to the saddle blanket and cinched them safe with a strap passed gentle across their swaddles. He checked the mare's eye and laid a palm to her neck. "Easy," he told the horse, which is how he asked the world for one more minute. He slid his left hand into the woman's fingers. Warmth tried to leave both of them and changed its mind. "We're going to the horse," he said. She nodded once. They took 2 steps. She faltered. He took more of her weight, like it was nothing and everything. The riders broke the rise then, coats flapping, hats low, their horses blowing hard. They saw him, saw her, saw the 3 small bundles on his saddle, and their faces shifted through surprise towards something meaner. Cole stepped between them and the fence out of habit more than thought. He didn't raise his gun. He didn't reach for it. His hands hung easy at his sides. The wind tugged his coat open and showed the worn, but of a revolver that had done enough talking in earlier years. He had put most of that life down. Not all of it. The one in front, a thick man with winter in his beard and whiskey in his confidence, reined short and grinned like a dog with a boot. He looked from a woman to the bundles and spat into the drift. 3, he said, as if counting failures. Should have left her for the wolves. Cole didn't look at him. He kept his eyes on the woman's face to give her somewhere steady to rest hers. He reached back and tightened the strap over the smallest girl with a touch that made the men's talk feel thin and far away. The thick man pushed his horse 2 steps closer, iron ringing. "That one is spoken for," he said, jerking his chin at the woman like she was a mule he'd traded wrong for. "Her man says she's done here. Says the Lord's too." Cole lifted his gaze, finally. What lived behind it was quiet and old. He measured the 3 men the way you measure whether you've seen before. He took the woman's wrist and placed her hand on the saddle horn, closing her fingers there so she could feel wood and leather and a promise that wasn't words. "She rides with me now," he said. No thunder in it, no boast, just a fence post set deep. The men laughed because laughter is the last tool of cowards when they meet something that won't move. The second one, younger and eager to impress cruelty, slid a glance at the babies and made a sound that asked to be hit. Cole's jaw twitched once. It stopped. "What's she to you?" the young one said, rein sawing his horse's mouth. "You aiming to raise girls as well as calves, Sawyer?" Cole didn't give him the respect of an answer. He slid his arm around the woman's back and lifted her into the saddle in one clean motion that said he'd done this before with broken cattle and broken men. She didn't cry out. Her breath left and then found its way back. He stepped up, put his boot in the stirrup, and swung behind her. He set his right arm across her middle to keep her steady and his left hand to the reins. The 3 small bundles pressed warm against his thigh, their tiny noises loud as bells now that they had a place to live. The thick man shifted his horse to block. His mouth practiced a threat. Cole guided his mare 2 strides left into the drift, using snow like another fence line. The men hesitated. Cole finds weakness first. He touched his heels, and the mare slid past with a grace no drunk can anticipate. "Leave her," the thick one called, voice growing around fear. "She's brought shame enough." Cole's head turned a fraction. "The only shame here," he said, "is yours." It was not anger. It was a verdict. They reach for guns because men like that do when someone shows them their size. Cole did not lift his. He laid the mare into the wind and made distance while the woman bowed her head against his chest and the 3 girls breathed into his coat. The first shot came wild and high. The second chewed bark off a post. He didn't answer either. He trusted the ground more than he trusted pride. At the break in the fence, where drifts made a pale canyon, he looked back once. The men were circling for courage and for a shot they wouldn't own. He turned his face into the snow and rode the line he knew blind. His arms stayed tight around her. His body made a wall for the children. The mare found the old cattle path by memory and took it as if she had been asked gently, not ordered hard. They reached the shelter of the timber. Wind dropped. The world remembered how to breathe. He pulled the mare to a walk and leaned close so she could hear without turning her head. "Name," he said. She swallowed. The word came rough from a throat that had been used for pleading, and then for screaming, and then for silence. "Ruth," she said. He nodded against her hair. "Cole." She held the saddle horn like it was the last solid thing left. Her shoulders shook once and were done. The 3 small bundles pressed into his side, quieting as the mare's steps found rhythm. Snow on the brim of his hat melted and ran into his collar. He did not notice. Behind them, the pasture shrank to a white field where posts stood like witnesses. Ahead, dark pines drew close. Somewhere past them, a house that did not yet know it would hold 4 more hearts tonight. He tightened his arm around her and rode for it. Not fast, not slow, only sure. The timber swallowed sound, softened the storm. Snow sifted through the pines, slow and deliberate, each flake choosing where to fall. Cole let the mare pick her way along the cattle trail, his arms steady around Ruth's waist. She leaned into him, not in choice but in exhaustion, her head dipping with each sway of the horse. The 3 girls pressed close, swaddled and bound beneath his coat, their cries fading into small, ragged breaths. Heat from his body and the mare's flank made a poor cradle, but it was more than the snow would ever give. Cole knew the land well enough to trust it blind. He guided them toward a cut in the hills where his line cabin waited. 4 walls, a roof, and a stove that smoked more than it burned. It had saved him once in winter. Tonight, it would have to save more than him. Ruth stirred when the cabin came into sight. A shadow crouched against the white. Her voice cracked. "What?" He didn't answer at once. He swung down, boots sinking deep, and caught her as she sagged from the saddle. She was lighter than she looked, bones wrapped in torn cloth and stubbornness. He carried her to the door, shouldered it open, and set her near the stove. "Because leaving you, there wasn't an option," he said finally, simple as fence posts in a straight line. He returned for the girls. One by one, he laid them on a folded blanket, close enough they could find each other's warmth. Their fists waved weak, their mouths opened and closed like fish pulled from water. Cole poured water into a pot and set it on the stove. He dug for the last tin of condensed milk he kept for trail emergencies. It wasn't much, but it was something. Ruth tried to rise, but pain bent her in half. Cole crouched beside her, unwrapping the ragged scarf from her middle. The rope burn had cut skin deep, bruises blooming in purple and black. He tore a strip from his own shirt and bound her again, cleaner, firmer. She flinched but didn't cry out. "Men did this," he said low. She met his eyes, hollow and fierce all at once. "My husband, his brothers, they wanted sons. Said 3 girls were a curse." Her voice broke like thin ice. Said I wasn't worth food for winter. Cole's jaw tightened. He set the cloth in place with hands steady even as his breath grew sharp. He had seen war and cattle thieves and men who thought cruelty was a kind of strength. But tying a mother to a fence for the sin of daughters, that was a rot deeper than any bullet wound. He checked the girls again. One stirred weakly, the smallest. He took her in his arms, rocking her against his chest. His callous thumb brushed her cheek, rough but careful. "No curse?" he murmured. "Not one." Ruth's eyes filled, tears slipping silent down her face. She turned her head away, ashamed of being seen so broken. Cole didn't press her. He fed the stove, warmed the milk, and dipped a cloth to press against the baby's lips. The girl sucked faintly, life stubborn as prairie grass through frost. Night thickened. The cabin creaked under wind. Cole settled the girls into a makeshift bed near the fire. Ruth lay wrapped in his spare blanket, shivering until heat finally began to reach her bones. "You don't have to stay," she whispered into the dark. "They'll come after me. After you." He looked at the fire, eyes steady. "Let them come." Her breath caught. No man had ever said such words for her, not once. She closed her eyes, the sound of the girl's uneven breathing filling the silence. Cole sat against the wall, rifle across his knees, hat low over his eyes. He didn't sleep. Outside, the storm howled. Inside, for lives clung to the narrow thread he had pulled from death's hands. Dawn broke gray and thin, a light that offered no warmth. The storm had passed, leaving silence heavy as stone. Snow lay unbroken around the cabin, except for the prints Cole's mare had cut the night before. He stood in the doorway, rifle resting against the frame, eyes scanning the tree line. Behind him, the cabin was small but alive. The stove muttered and spat. Ruth dozed on the cot, pale but breathing easier, the rope burned welt around her waist hidden under clean bandages. The 3 girls slept close, swaddled tight in his spare coat, their tiny chests rising and falling in unsteady rhythm. He had listened to that sound through the night, as if each breath had been a signal flare. Cole moved quiet, pouring coffee grounds into a dented pot. He'd been awake too long, but war had taught him how to live on less. His eyes never left the trees. The first sound came near noon. A crow startled into the air, black against white. Then the faint snap of a branch. He stepped outside, snow crunching beneath his boots, rifle in hand. He saw them before they saw him. 3 riders pushing through the timber, their shapes sharp against the drifts. He felt his chest go still. Same men from the night before. The husband, thick-shouldered, mean-eyed, riding in the middle. His brothers at either side, rifles strapped to saddles, confidence oozing like rot. They didn't ride fast. They didn't have to. They believed what was theirs would always be waiting. Cole stepped back into the cabin. Ruth had woken, eyes wide, already knowing from the look on his face. She clutched the blanket higher, lips bloodless. "They've come." she whispered. He nodded once. Stay inside. Keep the girls near the fire. Her voice cracked. They'll kill you. His eyes softened, but his tone was steady as bedrock. Not today. He opened the door and stepped out, shutting it behind him. The cold bit harder now, but he barely felt it. He planted his boots in the snow before the cabin and waited, rifle loose in his hands, calm as if he'd been born there. The riders pulled up 10 yards away, horses blowing steam. The husband grinned, yellow teeth against a black beard. Sawyer, he said, spitting the name like it was bitter. You've got something of mine. Cole's voice came quiet, carrying steady. No, I don't. The man's grin faded. His horse sidestepped, restless under the weight of his anger. That woman's my wife. Those whelps are mine. You think you can steal from me and walk away? Cole tilted his head, eyes narrowing just enough. A wife's not a mule. Children aren't cattle. You gave them up when you left them to die. One of the brothers barked a laugh, sharp and ugly. 3 girls, he sneered. A waste of good food. Cole's jaw tightened, but his hand stayed steady on the rifle. He had killed for less, in darker places. But this wasn't war. It was something smaller, meaner. He didn't plan to spill blood unless they forced his hand. She rides with me now, he said, slow and final. And those girls, too. You won't touch them again. The husband's face darkened, fury twisting it. She's mine by God's law, he spat. And you. Cole cut him off, voice sharp as a blade. God's law don't tie women to fences. Don't leave newborns to freeze. That was your law, and it ends here. For a long breath, no one moved. Snow hissed off branches overhead. The horses shifted, sensing the weight of men ready to break. The younger brother's hand twitched toward his rifle. Cole raised his own, just enough calm, eyes locked. The brother froze, sweat breaking despite the cold. He saw something in Cole's stare, something that said, I've walked through worse men than you, and I'm still here. The husband cursed low, spitting into the snow. This ain't done, Sawyer. You can't keep her, or them brats. They'll starve on your pride. Cole didn't flinch. Better to starve honest than live under your hand. The men lingered another moment, fury chewing at them. But none moved closer. One by one, they jerked their reins and turned their horses. Snow sprayed as they rode off, their curses trailing in the wind. Cole lowered his rifle only when the trees swallowed them whole. He stood there, breath rising in steady clouds, until silence returned. Inside, Ruth clutched the girls, tears spilling down her cheeks. When Cole stepped back into the cabin, her eyes met his. Fear, gratitude, and something she hadn't let herself feel in years. The faintest spark of hope. You don't know what you've done, she whispered. He shut the door, bolted it, and set the rifle down with quiet finality. I know exactly, he said. I gave you back what was already yours. She broke then, sobs shaking her thin frame. Cole knelt, one hand light on her shoulder, letting her weep. The babies stirred, crying with her, their voices rising together. Cole stared into the fire, jaw clenched, knowing the fight wasn't over, but also knowing he'd chosen his ground, and he wouldn't give it. The days that followed were brittle, each one sharp enough to cut. Snow kept falling, light at first, then heavy, pressing the world smaller. Cole split logs until his shoulders burned, the ring of the axe carrying through the valley like a bell warning strangers away. He stacked the wood high against the cabin wall, knowing the cold would test them before it was done. Inside, Ruth moved slow but with purpose. The bruises along her ribs and waist made each step a fight, but she did not complain. She wrapped the girls tight, fed them with careful sips from the milk Cole had bartered and stretched thin. She spoke little, her eyes always flicking toward the window, listening for hoofbeats that didn't come. Cole watched her sometimes when she didn't notice. There was a steadiness under the hurt, a spine the men who had beaten her hadn't managed to break. She worked beside him in silence, mending, tending, keeping the small cabin alive. He respected that more than any words she could have offered. One evening, when the wind rattled the shutters, Cole sat sharpening his knife by the fire. Ruth stirred from the cot, her voice low. They'll be back. Men like that don't forget. They'll want to prove you wrong. He looked up, the blade glinting in the firelight. Let them ride. They'll find nothing here but a door they can't open. She shook her head. You don't know him. My husband, Ezekiel, he don't stop. Not until he's broken what he thinks belongs to him. Cole studied her face. He saw the fear there, but also the fight. He set the knife aside. Then we don't hide. We make ready. The next morning he saddled the mare and rode to his own spread, a few miles west where the land opened. The ranch house stood weathered but strong, fences half buried in snow. He hadn't lived there proper in months, not since grief and silence had pushed him to wander. But now he looked at the house with new eyes. It was not just his anymore. By noon he had hauled blankets, more food, tools, and a second rifle back to the cabin. Ruth said nothing when he laid the supplies out, but her eyes softened. She understood what it meant. He was not just giving her shelter for a night. He was building her a place in his life, even if he didn't say the words. That evening, Samuel, the name Cole had given one of the girls in his mind, though Ruth hadn't yet chosen names, cried harder than the others, small fists waving. Cole lifted her with hands that dwarfed her, settling her against his chest. He walked the floorboards slow, humming an old tune no one had heard him sing in years. Ruth watched, her lips parting as if to speak, but she didn't. Instead, she let the sight warm her, a man who knew violence carrying a child as though she were glass. Later, as the fire burned low, Ruth spoke again. You could have left me. No one would have blamed you. A woman tied to a fence, 3 girls screaming. Most men would have walked away. Cole shook his head. Most men ain't worth listening to. He looked at her then, steady. And I've walked away from too much already. She lowered her gaze, tears cutting down her bruised cheeks. For the first time, she did not hide them. Cole didn't reach to wipe them away. He knew some grief needed to fall free, but he stayed close, his presence a wall against the cold and the memory of fists. The threat returned 2 nights later. Hoofbeats in the distance. Voices carried on the wind. Cole stepped outside, rifle in hand, snow crunching under his boots. Lantern light spilled from the cabin behind him. 3 shadows on horseback lingered at the edge of the trees, torches flaring in the dark. Ezekiel's voice called across the clearing, cruel and certain. You've made a thief of yourself, Sawyer. Hand her back, and maybe I'll leave you breathing. Cole didn't move. His voice came low, iron in it. She's not yours to claim. Not now. Not ever again. The torchlight wavered. Ruth's figure filled the cabin door behind him, a blanket around her shoulders, the cries of the girls faint inside. She saw Ezekiel's face, twisted with rage, and her body shook. But when Cole reached back and brushed her hand, just once, she held still. Then you'll die for her. Ezekiel spat. Cole lifted the rifle slow, steady, sight fixed. If that's the way it breaks. The standoff hung in the frozen air, every breath a blade. Ezekiel's brothers shifted in their saddles, doubt creeping in, fear of a man who didn't flinch. Cole stood rooted, silent, his figure a post they could not move. At last Ezekiel cursed, spurring his horse. We'll be back, he growled, retreating into the trees. And when we come, we'll take all 3 brats too. The night closed in again, leaving only silence. Cole lowered the rifle and turned to Ruth. Her face was pale, but her jaw set firm. They'll come again, she whispered. Cole nodded. Then we'll be ready. Inside the cabin, the fire burned low, the girls stirred in their sleep, and 2 people who had been broken by different storms sat close enough to share the same heat. The cold deepened, pressing the valley into silence. Days blurred into long hours of chopping wood, tending cattle, and keeping 3 fragile lives fed by scraps of milk and stubbornness. Cole rarely spoke, but his presence filled the cabin like a pillar, steady enough that Ruth leaned on it without words. The nights were hardest. Ruth woke often to the girls' thin cries, lifting one after another to her chest. Sometimes she found Cole already awake, pacing with one of the infants in his arms, rocking slow, his face unreadable in the firelight. He never said what he felt, but Ruth saw it in his eyes. He was binding himself to these children, to her, as if it had been chosen long before. But Ezekiel's words hung over them like smoke. We'll be back. We'll take all 3 brats too. Cole began working beyond the cabin, cutting deeper into the timber, setting new posts for a fence that didn't need building yet. Ruth watched him from the doorway, understanding without asking. He wasn't preparing to run. He was laying claim. This land, this cabin, these lives, he meant to defend them. One evening, when the wind carried no sound, Ruth finally spoke the question that had weighed on her chest. You could have sent me away, taken me to town, left me with the preacher's wife, and walked free of all this. Why didn't you? Cole didn't lift his eyes from the knife he was sharpening. The blade whispered against the stone. Because I saw a woman tied to a fence, he said, voice low, and 3 children left in the snow. No man who walks away from that deserves to keep breathing. Her throat tightened. She turned away so he wouldn't see the tears, but his words settled inside her like coals, burning slow, steady, alive. The final reckoning came at dawn, 3 days later. The sound of hooves woke him first. He was already on his feet, rifle in hand, when Ruth stirred. Her eyes widened with fear. Cole, keep them close, he said. Through the frost-rimmed window, dark shapes moved against the pale snow. Ezekiel and his brothers. This time there were 4 men, armed and ready. They rode in hard, voices shouting, torches high. Cole stepped outside, boots sinking deep, rifle steady across his chest. The fire from their torches painted his face in sharp lines, but he didn't flinch. Ezekiel's voice carried over the snow. Last chance, Sawyer. Hand over the woman and those girls, or you'll die where you stand. Cole didn't move. He shifted the rifle just enough to let them see he wasn't bluffing. She rides with me now, he said, calm as ever. And she stays. You'll not take her. You'll not touch them again. Ezekiel snarled, spurring his horse forward. His brothers followed, rifles lifting. Ruth's cry rang from the doorway, sharp and terrified. The girls stirred, their thin wails cutting through the night. Cole's heart hammered once, then went still. He stepped forward, rifle raised, boots biting into snow. His voice cracked the air like a whip. Turn back, or I'll drop the first man that moves closer. The standoff hung in the cold. Ezekiel's horse pawed, restless, sensing his rider's fear. One of the brothers swore under his breath. They had expected a broken drifter, not a man who stood as if the whole earth rooted him. The silence stretched until the younger brother tugged his reins, muttering, not worth it. Another followed. The fire in Ezekiel's eyes dimmed as he realized he was outnumbered not by men, but by resolve. He spat into the snow, hate burning, then yanked his horse around. We'll see how long you keep him, he growled. Winter's long. Cole didn't lower the rifle until their shadows vanished into the trees. Then, slowly, he turned back to the cabin. Ruth stood in the doorway, clutching the girls to her chest. Her body trembled, but her eyes held something new. Not fear, not despair, something steadier. When Cole stepped inside, she whispered, "You didn't have to fight for us." He set the rifle aside, his breath shaking for the first time that day. "Yes," he said quietly. "I did." Ruth's tears came, but softer this time, born not from pain, but from a fragile hope. She crossed the room, set the smallest girl in his arms. He held her close, the tiny heartbeat pressing against his chest. Outside, snow still fell. The storm would come again. But inside the cabin, beneath the low glow of the fire, for lives had been pulled back from the edge. And in the silence, for the first time, Ruth whispered the words that had been trapped in her throat. "You gave us a home." Cole didn't answer. He only held her gaze, the child against his chest, and let the truth stand between them like a vow unspoken but already kept.